look at that. I started a hang on air. I'm professional now.
I'm so proud.
Thanks. Guess I can die now. My life's complete. At least graduate, right?
I was gonna say it's too bad you figured it out at the end. But I guess better late than never.
On to some other new equipment or process for school.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Somebody have the questions they want to copy, or?
I'm doing that right now.
Okay. It's good. You're young. You're faster than I am.
I was already pulling it up before you asked.
Okay, let's see. What does it say? What were your impressions of the CRC article and video by the United Nations? And what about the article and videos by parental rights? Anybody have any thoughts? You want to go first?
Hold on, I'm actually going to type as we go because I'm taking notes, so.
I'll go first. When I first read it, I'm just glancing at it and going, oh, this sounds really good. And, you know, that like they are really concerned about the children and everything else. And then when I really got reading it, I'm going, wait a minute, because I knew it wasn't, you know, I knew it wasn't what it sounded like, but it was interesting to see how it actually was worded so that it sounded like this really great program and all that stuff. And as I read it, I thought about the video we watched earlier on Africa and how they were being forced to do all the condoms and all that stuff, and how they were getting away from the traditional marriage and abstinence and stuff like that, and how they didn't want that. And then as I was listening to I lost my thought. Okay. As I was listening to what Kelly was talking about at the CRC and the union and stuff like that, and how they do it behind closed doors, and how much money they have, my first thought went to the temple and how we're taught about how Satan will reign and rule, and how it's all tied to money. And I thought, wow. All of a sudden that became clearer as to how he actually works in the dark, in the behind closed doors, so you don't know what's going on, and it's backed by tons and tons of money, and then it really scared me.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting because it kept bringing back some of the stuff that we learned last week about the reframing and rephrasing things, but they do it in a clever way where it's more of a manipulation, not a good kind of manipulation. It's not one to help you understand things better. It's more cloak and dagger.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed too on the one website that said get the kids involved. It's pro kids. Well, sure, I have teenagers that don't want to get up for church. Yeah, get the kids involved so they don't have to get up for church and go to church, and why not? But some of that stuff was kind of scary as I was reading through, and it really made it sound like it was a good idea until you really looked into what it wanted. You know, even the list of like the 20 things that it was about,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some of those were good, but the really underlining of what it is about, yeah, it was pretty interesting.
So many loopholes that could further this into the wrong setting. And I did like Victoria. Is it Victoria? Sorry. Is it Victoria? Roseanne. Sorry.
Kelly?
Roseanne, what's your last name?
Lloyd?
Lloyd. I don't know where that other name came from. When I thought of the Africa, or how they're imposing the human rights, and how it may look like human rights, I thought that same thing, but and then it just left so much open, and I kept thinking of that one girl that sued her family, her parents, because they wouldn't pay for her college, and she won. And I thought of that as something that, it's scary for me that the children would feel like that's something okay, that they're and it furthered the entitlement. But then I thought how sad that these kids that are in these other countries are actually going to be hurt by this, because people are going to start to see it for what it is, and they're not going to get the justice and the that they do need, of being healthy and happy and not abused and taken advantage of. But so it's just really the saddest thing that these kids are actually the ones that are going to get hurt when people are trying to push their agenda through.
That's true, and that was a good example. I remember that story when it first came out.
I couldn't believe that they won, that the girl won, because she has a right to education, and yes, she does have a right to education, but she can do it on her own. All 5 of my kids have done it on their own. I'm doing it on my own. What? Yeah. Anyway.
So, yeah. I grew up on a farm, and my parents always, in exchange for, instead of us going out and getting a job, if we helped on the farm, which we did, we worked hard and we worked a lot, but they helped pay for our education. So that was kind of a deal, because it was in exchange for work. So.
And I've even talked to my son about that, and I said, I'm obligated to give you room and board, or room and food, and anything else is a perk, just so you know. And so we actually had this conversation recently, and his phone, I have him on a cellular service that I can actually change it twice a month without any problems. And so when he doesn't do his work, it goes down to what I call the $5 plan. And basically, all he can do is talk and text. There's no Snapchat. No. And it's amazing how they're so, attuned to the video and conference calls and the Snapchats and all that stuff, that as soon as you take that away, he was like, I can't communicate with my friends. They don't just text anymore, Mom. So.
Okay, should we go on to the next question?
Yeah.
If you're from or have ever lived in a country where the CRC has already been ratified, what are some of the positive and negative effects you've observed as a result? Anybody ever lived in a different country?
No.
Okay. If you're from the U.S. or Somalia where the CRC has not yet been ratified, then research another country to document the positive and negative effects and how they relate to how they could benefit or hurt your country with a future CRC ratification.
Did anybody do the research?
No, not yet.
I've lived in another country, and I'm trying to see if it's one of the ones that ratified it, and I don't know. So I'm just...
Well, I couldn't really get the site to work very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggled with that too, and getting the site to go where I wanted it to go.
Maybe just Google it, Elisa. I can't remember where you said.
Yeah, well, I Googled countries that ratified the CRC, but this only lists the first 20, and I want to see all of them. Oh wait, here. Wikipedia to the rescue, maybe? Because it says it was that it was ratified by all but 190 something.
Of the UN
Oh,
nations.
140, yeah. So I'm just trying to see, but see, this doesn't list it either.
Remind me which country you went to. Was it Taiwan or China or?
I lived in South Korea for a little while.
What? Say it again.
South Korea.
South Korea.
Well, when I did my report on that world geography or world, I can't remember whatever that class was. I did it on India, and it was mainly I chose India because my husband was going over there quite often at the time, and so he was able to bring me back, information and stuff. And the one thing that I noticed was that even with those things in place, like it talked about on the videos, countries are not following through with it. So the basic human rights of a child are not being played, but the exploitation of them are being played. And so I just, the problems with the CRC, the government, I mean, they may sign it, ratify it, and say, hey, look at us, but to me, it seemed like most of those countries that have signed it, probably 50% are not even following through on just making sure that children have their basic needs. So this, and then to implement, I haven't lived in any of the countries where, or even researched into countries that were rich enough to where you would see the implications on legal, like those two ladies were talking about, but it just seems like those that are developing countries are still struggling with just the basic needs.
Yeah. They said they didn't have the infrastructure.
So,
Elise,
what?
it ratified in 1991.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this, and actually a lot of these countries had reservations, like when they signed it, they were like, well, we're not going to do this. Korea was one of those. They decided they weren't going to, they didn't consider themselves bound by some of the articles.
So my question is if you're going to sign something, how do you get around and around what you've signed? Because when you sign something, it binds you.
Well, so it shows right here that so it says declarations and reservations, which unless otherwise indicated, they were made upon ratification, acceptance, accession or succession. So it says like the country, and then it says upon signature, and then whatever they said about it. So some of the people just put down things like, we're going to do this, or this doesn't count for us. But some of them were like, yeah, we don't like this, and we're not going to do this part.
Uh-huh.
So some of them signed it even though they knew that there were parts that weren't going to. Interesting.
So I didn't have time to read everything last night. I started doing 15 hours a week for my internship, so I fell behind. So I didn't do all the reading, but I'm just like reading some of these reservations, and it's some of them are like, we agree with this in principle, but the specific idea isn't something. This specific sentence is one that we don't agree with.
Oh, I see. So probably they were saying we'll sign this, but we want it on.
It says Australia accepts the general principle of Article 37. but then it gives a reason, and then it says Australia therefore ratifies the convention to the extent that it is unable to comply with the obligation imposed by Article 37C, which is the sentence that they didn't disagree with, or which is the sentence that they did disagree with. So it's
Okay.
like they would ratify it, but they would say, but not this part.
Okay, so they want it, basically they want it on record that they don't. Okay.
Yeah, so they're like, we'll do this, but just so you know.
Well, I find it interesting that we didn't sign the U.S., but we're definitely dealing with issues legally because of it. So it doesn't, it didn't matter whether we signed or not. And even other countries, maybe we would have been better had we signed it and said, but we're not going to deal with this. I don't know. It just seems like the putting on record what we agreed and what we didn't agree with may have been, and maybe it's there, I don't know, but it just seems like we're still having to battle it regardless of whether we signed it or not.
Right.
I actually looked up Africa to see what it said, and I found it interesting that not only did they ratify it, but they went ahead and made a different, like, contract or whatever that went further or was for their country only, because it didn't meet all their needs or all their or what they wanted. So they did a different, I don't know what they called it now. I can't remember what they called it, but they did a different document. There you go, where they went through and said, well, this will be better and this would be better, or we want to do it this way. I thought that was interesting that they would do that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, should we go to the next question? How did Kelly's presentation help your understanding of the ecological approach to family advocacy?
I just like how she explains things. It makes it pretty clear to me.
She's a great speaker.
She is, and she's warm and open and friendly and engaging. So, yeah.
I liked how she gave examples of how she had advocated in each of in the micro, meso, and macro. And then she gave an example of each of them. I went, wow, okay. Now you can kind of see what that looked like.
Yes, it helps you understand it so much more, doesn't it? When you can at least for me, when I can visualize something.
Yes.
My brother or my son gets so tired of me doing that. He's like, not another metaphor, Mom. Don't paint another picture. But it works. It works.
It does.
No more.
Well, she makes it seem so easy to advocate, too. It's not that easy sometimes.
Right.
I'm trying to do it now for the drill teams, and it's not easy. It's not easy to find the right people to fight to, and you run around in circles a lot, and you get thrown around in circles. It's not easy, but she makes it seem like, oh, you just write this letter and everybody falls at your feet, and it's hard. It's a lot of work.
It is. Well, and there's some things when you're advocating that can, or trying to make a change for good. Like there is a couple of websites. They're linked together, but it's 1millionmoms.com, 1milliondads.com, and I think they're run by the Dr. James Dobson. I think they're related to that. But what they do is they go through and all of the advertising that's inappropriate for families, they will write a letter, and you just go in. They'll notify you by email. You just click on the link. You sign your name to the letter, and they have thousands and thousands of They get thousands and thousands of signatures, and they'll get people to change their advertising, or they will get companies to stop running ads from certain companies. So that kind of advocacy is a little bit easier because it's just It's all set up for you to go in and do that. But there are other things when you're down on the ground and you're the one, hitting the pavement, like what you're doing. That is harder, much harder.
I remember hitting the pavement for Prop 8, and I know I've talked about it before, but it is definitely the harder thing to do.
Have any of you served missions? No.
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 Me neither.
You? No?
No. Thought about it, but didn't.
My son has gotten to the point where knocking on doors is nothing to him. I still even have a hard time visiting teaching families sometimes. It's just, I'm just not a very, I guess I can talk when I need to, but once you get going, I guess I don't stop. But getting me to get going sometimes is hard. But anyways, that's digression.
One thing, last week, the lady from UFI, the really tiny, quiet one, I can't remember her name, but she was saying, no, maybe it wasn't her. Oh, yes, it was her. She was saying sometimes it's just one little thought that, if you put one little thought in or one little thing that you do when we're working together in a group, someone else can pick that up and run with it because they'll have the knowledge or they'll have the resource or the skill that can do that. So I think, building, and that's what they're doing, is that they're building the network of advocates, because that increases the chance or likelihood that someone will have what they need or to be able to expand on each thing. And then the other mother, the one with 9 kids, she says she does it in like 45 minutes a day. I'd like to see her Pinterest board. So that's all I have to say.
We talked a little on the next one, but what system or level do you personally feel would be the most difficult to advocate?
I feel like the higher the level, the more difficult it is to advocate. Like, the farther away it is from, like, the family, the bigger the audience, I think it's harder for me because you're in front of more people. I'm putting my thoughts and ideas in front of more people. It's easier to sit down with one family and advocate for good family practices, and it's harder to stand in front of, to do what, like, Kelly does and stand up in front of everybody and say, hey, that's not right.
And the part I would find hard with that is, like, because a lot of advocating is not just getting up in front of the UN or places like Kelly has done, but when you advocate on social media or in print, like if you're quoted in the paper or something, the backlash and the things that people say and the things that they do, if they don't like what you say and they really don't like it, there's a lot of people that get death threats or they get hate mail, they get there's some really, really nasty things, and that would be really hard for me. It would be really hard. You'd have to get thick skin on your back.
And I think when you're on the family level, you kind of turn into that mama bear, and that is easier to advocate for your kids or your family because it's so personal. If you have to go to the school and kind of advocate for your kids, it's so personal and you're mama bear, but when you're fighting for your community, it's a little bit harder because you're not so emotional. Well, I mean, you can be emotional, but it's harder on that big open level.
Well, but even teaching other families or working with other families and advocating like that, advocating for the general principles to individuals, I think is still a lot easier than, like the higher up the chain you go, the more removed you are from what's immediately in front of you, I think it gets harder.
I think the reason why it gets harder the further out you go is because you've got, like you've said, a larger variety and general population to tend with, and that opens you up with the criticism. Whereas when you're working directly, one-on-one or even in small groups, then you're going to have less of a chance of somebody coming back and saying that was horrible. But I think anytime you're teaching in general, whether, I mean, I've had bad Relief Society lessons that I've taught, and I've had really good ones. And so, I think that's just something that goes along with it. But I also think, when I was thinking about what you were saying, the larger the audience, I think anybody who puts themselves out there, whether you're famous or you're advocating or whatever it is that you're out there, you open yourself up for criticism, and sometimes that's the reason why people have a hard time even bearing their testimony, because they're putting themselves out there and opening themselves up for criticism. And I think that's where we have a hard time even sharing the gospel, is we're opening ourselves up for criticism. Is it hard, just as hard to share the gospel to a group as it is to share it one-on-one? To me, I'm more apt to share it to a group than I am on one-on-one, because I won't have that in-my-face rejection. So I guess it all depends on I guess what we're advocating for, because sometimes a big group may stand up and stand behind you, whereas one person in front of you may totally berate you and pull you down. So
that's what I've been thinking too, because Elisa usually is the one that plays the devil's advocate or brings the other side of things into it. So what if sometimes the smaller the group, it might be harder because it's more personal, like Deneen was saying, that it's more the rejection. If there is rejection, it is more personal. It's and closer to your heart. Whereas if you get up in front of the UN, you don't know those people. You're probably never going to see them again. And if they have something to say, you're not gonna see them every day.
It's true, but I can deal better with rejection from one person than the possibility of rejection from a whole room of people. I mean, this is just me personally. I can definitely see why some people would be like, they're a bunch of strangers. Does it really matter what they think?
Yeah, it's definitely
and you really care about what strangers think of you?
It's definitely a personal thing, and I think that's why she says, what do you find, what is personally, how do you personally feel? I personally would rather get up in front of people and know that I will never see them again, but the one-on-one for me is harder. I get too emotionally attached, I think, that way. So
I agree with Elisa. I would sooner do a small group. The big group scares me. And it's like, but they know so much more than I do. So why am I trying to? Especially, you're thinking of, like the UN and stuff and all these powerful people, and it's like, oh, that just scares me.
Well, but then she was saying that, like, some of the people in the UN aren't really qualified to be there. They're just there because they're somebody's friend.
I know. I thought, wait a minute, then why are they there?
But, like, as an outsider, you don't know things like that.
Right, yeah. While you guys were talking, I thought about my son that's on his mission right now. And when he was in high school, we were listening to conference, and I can't remember who it was that was talking about standing up for the family. And so when conference was over, he redid his Facebook and put a picture of the temple and says, I believe in a marriage between a man and a woman. Holy cow, I could not believe instantly all the hate mail that came back to him. And all of his friends that just berated him, several of them completely quit being friends with him. And it was very interesting how just that one little thing, standing up for, what was right and truth was really hard on him.
It brings into perspective Lehi's vision. Why would these people go all the way to the tree? They follow the path. They stay, they're righteous, they're good, they do what they're supposed to. They get to the tree, they partake of the fruit, and then they fall away. And that puts it into more perspective. These are his friends. These are people that were closer to him, and over one little thing, they get so angry, and so sometimes people might question, well, am I right or am I wrong, or it's just one little thing.
Yeah.
I'll just go with the mainstream on that, and I think that's kind of dangerous. I have some friends who have left the church. They're like she was the roommate of mine at Rick's, and one of them, and she served a mission and has always been a strong member of the church. She didn't get married until she was 34, and some issues that her husband had or had in the past have made her stop and think, and she's more mainstream on things now, and to the point where they have left the church over those opinions, and it makes me sad just to see what she's giving up and what her children will miss. But yeah. I really think with her someday her heart will change, and that she'll come back. But it's hard. It's hard for them.
It is, yeah. And several of his friends were not LES, and their big issue was that most of their family were gay, and so to put that in front of them was
it's
yeah.
Well,
it
was
very interesting
too. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's right. No, I was done. Although the same day I had my daughter-in-law do the same thing that my son did, and she got a lot of hate and rebuttal. And I thought, how interesting that they both did it for almost the same time, and how much it was like shocking that people reacted that way. I don't know if I had expected that or not, but yeah.
Well, tell him take heart, because even my son defriended me after I had put that up there.
Oh. Oh dear.
He refriended me later, but after we had a little bit of talking. But it was just kind of funny. He was like, I can't support you on that one. I'm like, you don't have to support me on that one. I'm just placing. I don't support you living with your girlfriend either, so it's just a matter of. But since then, he's refriended me and he's married, but at the time it was different. Anyway.
Have we already gone through all the questions?
No, the last question, we have one more.
Yeah, it's why is it most important? What level do you personally feel is the most important to advocate?
I don't know.
Oh, go ahead, Chance, and then I'll go.
Sorry. I don't know if there's a level that I could think is more important. A lot of it, to me, would depend on kind of the subject matter, but I think at all levels is important. I don't know.
Go, Alyssa. Lisa.
So I think the most important level to advocate at is directly to families, because in the end it's people that make decisions for themselves and people that make decisions for their families. It's kind of like I don't know where I was going with that. Or I do, but I can't think of what I was going to say. But I feel like if we give the knowledge in the microsystem. Not necessarily our microsystem, but each family's microsystem, like work with families to help them to know what they need. Then they make the changes in their families, and they make changes to all of the other levels, because we know that all of the levels interact with each other. It's bidirectional. And I feel like at the exo level, the exosystem level, we can make changes, but telling somebody to do something isn't necessarily going to make them do it. And that's kind of, I mean, yeah, it can have a trickle-down effect, and some people will do that. But I feel like working with people to gain a real and deep understanding of what's good and why it's good, in the long run, will have a more lasting effect and a greater effect.
That's really good. That reminded me of something I put in my paper last week, because it said something about families are the building blocks of society, and marriage is the foundation. And so, I guess if you want to talk about the most important place to advocate, yeah, I think you're right, that in the families and in the home, if you put things in their hands, one person, I also read last week that one person can make a difference. One family at a time, families can make a difference. And a lot of the things that have come out recently about, or from the first presidency in the church, about making a difference in the world and what we can do. A lot of it is just the small and simple changes that we make individually in our own homes, like making what they want us to make the Sabbath more holy. So in our homes and in our wards and our stakes, they're doing things to, and we are doing things to make our Sabbath more holy, which is right down there, the microsystem, mesosystem. So really good point, Lisa.
I mean, as an example, and maybe it's just because, I don't know. But anyway, an example of this is that my internship is with a nonprofit that works with domestic violence and sexual assault victims. And it's like, I'm thinking, you make these laws that, criminalize abuse and assault and negligence and things, but just making these things illegal doesn't stop people from doing them. What stops people from doing these things is teaching them that these things hurt families. These things, don't let yourself become a victim to this, because it hurts you and it hurts your children and it hurts your children's children, and what really makes the difference. And yeah, what this organization does is possible because of grant money and funding from the government and things like that. But I mean, this is just one organization, but if you work with the families, you give them the power to make the choices, and when the choice is theirs and they've made that choice for themselves, those effects are more lasting than if somebody just says you can't do this or you can do this. He's smiling at you.
I can't tell. He's behind my picture.
Yeah, he's smiling at you. He had a big old cheesy smile.
Oh, good.
Well, I agree that's what I put was the microsystem, the family, and my thought kind of went along the same line. The proclamation says that if the family is destroyed, then all of society will crumble. So if we so if we work at the micro level and build the families and strengthen the families, then then that will help the rest of it.
Here, I agree, but I want to pose a question. I'm gonna play Alyssa for today.
Everybody's playing me but me today. I'm proud of you.
I just I feel
I'm
like
almost into it,
when
okay?
the majority of us
Yeah,
are focused, I think that's a big part. I think most people want to have a happy, healthy family. Most people are still wanting to get married. Most people, you know, it's it's the minority that are being vocal and trying to push um, their beliefs out there. So, as I mean, we can have 100 people who believe families are great, but then we're going to have one or two that are going to say, yeah, but my family is different, and so I need to push my agenda out there. And so with it, I think that even though, you know, we can push the family, but like you said, you can't force people to do it. So we have to be just as vocal in outside in our community and in the bigger picture, or else those minorities are going to push through. So you know, I feel like the family is important and we need to strengthen that, but we also, I think it's really important that we don't let the minority win.
It's
So,
the squeaky wheel that's going to get it wrong.
yeah, we need to be louder than the squeaky wheel. We need to have our full-on air brakes moving. I drive a bus, so that's those are loud brakes, loud wheels. Anyway.
I'm sitting here thinking the wheels on the bus go round and round.
Yeah. The kids like to try and sing that, but I always say, you're distracting me, you can't sing, just because they get louder and louder and louder. If it's a Friday and we're all done, there'll be times when I'll let them, I call it Free Friday, you can sing as loud as you want. Usually that goes from the Wheels on the Bus to some sort of Taylor Swift song, but you know, hey.
You should have them try to do a mashup with Wheels on the Bus and a Taylor Swift song. See how it comes out.
Yeah, some days it's just a matter of getting them home as fast as possible. Anyway.
Are we ready to summarize?
Buddy.
I think my grandpa needs help with my grandma. He just called.
Okay.
So, okay, so we talked about, we all felt that it was a good idea on the surface with the United Nations article, the CRC article, but then as we educated ourselves more with the other videos and insights, we saw that there was definitely undertones to it that could be very destructive. I thought we were pretty unanimous on that. If anybody objects, please raise your hand. In the researching the countries, that was, Alyssa looked up as we were talking the countries and found that many would sign, but they had vocalized their reservations in certain aspects of it that they either were in disagreement of or with on. And I talked about India and how they did not have the infrastructure to follow through on even the basic needs. And Roseanne talked about Africa and said that they made an addition to the article to meet their needs. And then with Kelly's presentation, everyone enjoyed the video and how she explains things. She makes it very simple. She did a good job of showing the colonial system and breakdown on each level. Then with the what system or level do you personally feel would be most difficult to advocate? Most of us talked about how it would be easier to work on a smaller level. Some of us felt that it would be easier with a larger group because you're not as emotionally connected, but we all felt that it would be easier for us on a smaller level. And then the last one, the system or level do you personally feel is the most important to advocate and why? We all felt the family is the very most important place for advocacy, And then I talked about being vocal in our beliefs and standing for what we believe in and being an example and making sure that the minorities aren't louder than the majority. And that's my summary. Did I miss anything that anybody feels needs to be put in there?
That sounds good.
Sounded great.
Did we all say our names at the beginning? Did I just miss that?
No, we didn't.
Well, should we do that now then, I guess, before signing off?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so Elisa Swenson,
Janine Felshaw.
Yes. Shamsi Christensen.
Melissa,
Mind.
Melissa Hunt. Okay, I'll hit stop.